More money and more inspiration is on the way for first-time startup entrepreneurs in Singapore. The grants and mentorship are part of enhancements to support a program aimed at encouraging new businesses. The Manpower Ministry says startups are a source of thousands of new jobs under the SG United Jobs and Skills programs. The National Council of Social Service, or NCSS, is aiming to boost its pool of volunteer managers. It's setting aside $8 million under a 2-year manpower funding scheme in an effort to hire more managers into the social service sector. And for a closer look at the job situation during the pandemic, we're joined by Professor Sumit Agarwal from the NUS Business School. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. So, a lot of focus now we're putting on upskilling, traineeships, and, professional conversions. To what extent will this pivot or drive the jobs market?
So just to step back, unemployment rate in most countries doubled, tripled, or even went up 5 times. So clearly, a lot of people have lost their jobs. How do we get them all back? Some countries have kind of maintained the contact between the employer and employee. And so what they're doing is saying, okay, of the people who are retrenched, if we want to bring you back, we will still need to kind of upscale you or provide you new skills because the marketplace has shifted. For example, if you go to a restaurant now, there is no waiter. You actually have a QR code that you kind of take a picture of in your phone and then make an order from the menu on your phone. So we have lost those kind of jobs, and I think they're not coming back. So we have to ask the people who used to do those jobs to retrain or get some new kind of training or new kind of job. And I think it's a must at this point that if we want full employment or if we want these people to come back to the labor force, we have to do this.
Well, coming back to the report, it does indicate that startups are a bright spot here. What's your take on the growth of startups and how can they work through the pandemic?
So I'm very optimistic about the startups in this situation. In the past, startups typically don't have a lot of money, and the business model they are bringing or the products they are bringing are much more techy, and they are not needed in those situations. But in the current situation, the startups are the exact thing we need because they're bringing fresh ideas and exactly the ideas how to deal with pandemic where human interaction is limited and technology is what can actually grow the economy. So these startups who are agile, who can actually hire people, and we will see many more startups get both funding from VCs but also from government funding that will allow them to make the country more efficient because clearly some jobs will not come back, but the startups will bring in technology that will increase efficiency.
All right, so speaking of that funding, more support expected through the Jobs Growth Incentive Scheme, how can startups use that then?
So clearly, they should kind of convince the government not only how good the business model is, but how will they employ the local population, especially people who are older, but even younger. So older, they could retrain them, but younger population, if they can hire them and use their new skills. So I think that's how the money will flow in. Even the VCs will want to see the right business model where they're actually employing or deploying the resources, not only the technological resources, but the human capital in the right way.
Well, Professor, the top 3 cost-saving measures named in the report include adjustments to monthly salary commitments, no-pay leave, and a shorter work week. How effective are these?
I think for now, that's the only way. I mean, think about there are 2 models. One is for them to retrench, where they sever the relationship. The other is to kind of reduce the salaries or ask them to work less. This, to me, sounds more equitable because everybody is sharing the pain. The one thing I would say on this is instead of cutting the salaries of the junior staff, just like the government, which has said we are going to cut the salaries of the most senior staff in the government, Why don't the private sector say, also, we will cut the salaries, or the bigger cut of the salaries be for the senior staff, or maybe the bonuses will be gone this year. So at least they can save the jobs of the junior employees, and actually it will be more equitable and in the long run more benefit even to the shareholders and the companies themselves.
But then we already see retrenchment numbers go up. Besides financial support from government, what else can companies do?
I think that they actually, in my mind, some of these companies used COVID as a means to retrench and bring in technology. They were thinking of bringing in technology for a long time, but they couldn't really justify it. Now they could easily justify retrenching it and say, look, we because of the circumstances, we are doing this. But I think this is a bad model because you're creating lower growth, lower consumption. Higher employment means people will not consume as much. That will hurt economic growth, but also hurt these same companies because they want to sell products and services. If there's higher employment, people are not buying these products and services. They may say technology will actually make it more efficient, but it's not true. It's not obvious. For example, we might have a vaccine in 6 months. Okay, and then we may want to go back to the old business model where everything was back to where just before COVID. Now, all this technological advancement may not actually pan out for them.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening, Professor Sumit Agarwal from the NUS Business School.